I miss the Wii U. Now, if you're still watching, that either means that A, you think I'm insane and just want to see what kind of insane tangent I'm going to go on, or B, it means that you agree, or, maybe it's a mix of the two. Now, this is coming from a place of somebody where I was there for the entirety of the Wii U, starting from the launch of the Wii U with something like New Super Mario Bros. U, for example, and I stuck with it through the entire way until the Switch released, and even after the Switch release, obviously, it's literally just this morning I was playing on my Wii U, and in fact, I was playing the Wii U version of Mario Kart 8. Now, before we get too much farther into this isn't going to be like a full retrospective of the Wii U, talking about before the thing released, up until afterwards, up until through the Switch's release and all that. No, this is just going to be like a simple sit-down, rambly conversation about my feelings about the Wii U and just how much I love and adore this system. And first things first, what better way to talk about my love for the system than to talk about the system itself and the UI and all that. So one thing that I've said many times before, which may or may not be a controversial take, is that I vastly prefer the Wii U as a console over the Nintendo Switch. And I'm not talking about the games themselves or any of the features with the console. I'm literally just talking about the console on a fundamental level. When you turn it on, what is that experience like? And for the Wii U, when you turn it on, you're blasted immediately with that beautiful home screen with the ethereal music, and you're immediately transported into the Nintendo realm. And that is one thing that I've always loved about Nintendo systems. You turn on the GameCube, you get the little cube with the you already know what I'm talking about. You get the amazing start up there and the great menu. You turn on the Wii, and everybody knows the Wii menu between the channels and the music itself. And the Wii U, it was basically just the next evolution of the Wii. It was one of those things where you turn it on and it's just clear that it's like Nintendo is saying, hey, this is the Wii, but it's been hitting the gym. You know what I mean? Like it's beefed up a little bit. It's nice, it's shiny, it's HD, but it's still, what's the word that I want to use here? It's, when you turn on the Wii U, I don't know how else to describe it besides it's like an escape. It's very calm, it's very gentle, yet in a way, with the way that some of the games were presented on the Wii U, it was very in your face of like, hey, this is a Nintendo in HD, MF, like this is where we're at now. And as controversial as a game like New Super Mario Bros. U is, for example, having something like that at launch for me, because, obviously I was a bit younger at the time, and as somebody that grew up with, the original DS, playing New Super Mario Bros. DS, and the original Wii, playing games like New Super Mario Bros. Wii all the time, it was just one of those things where, seeing this in HD for the first time, words cannot describe how excited it made me for the future of not only the Wii U, but just Mario and Nintendo in general. And again, this is another controversial take on my end, but I always loved New Super Mario Bros., right? So I know for some people looking at New Super Mario Bros. U as being the launch title for the Wii U, and the fact that we never really got a true 3D Mario, we got 3D World, but we never got the standard 3D Mario that you would expect with something like Super Mario 64 or Mario Odyssey or Mario Galaxy or Sunshine, for example. And more times than not, when it comes to those, 3D Mario games, those big generational, once in a generation kind of 3D Mario games, or just big Mario titles in general, we typically see those towards the beginning of the generation. Think with the DS, we got Super Mario 64 at launch, Super Mario 64 the original for the N64 at launch, Sunshine real close to launch, Mario Galaxy, Galaxy 2, Odyssey, all same thing there. Even if those games don't release at launch, it's very close to it within a few year span. So on one hand, I can kind of understand why there was a bit of disappointment of it just being New Super Mario Bros. U, or even in retrospect looking at it okay, that's all that we got at launch. But at the same time, for somebody like me, where I'm just happy to have a new Mario game, like Super Mario Bros. Wonder, I'm gonna just say it could have literally just been another New Super Mario Bros. Game, and I would have been more than satisfied and happy with it, just because I'm the type of guy where I accept games and art for what it is, right? It doesn't matter if we're talking about comics, anime, movies, video games. The reason that people find themselves to be so disappointed with most media is because they are stuck in this constant loop of comparing it to what they wish or thought something would be, or to what something was that they got in the past, rather than looking at something on its own merits and embracing it and appreciating it for the beautiful work of art that it is. So when you just, stop comparing comparing everything to, you know, whatever else, and you just look at something like New Super Mario Bros. U on the start. I know this is like a video that has literally half just been about New Super Mario Bros. U so far, but it's kind of for a reason that we're gonna get to in a little bit. But anyway, when you just look at New Super Mario Bros. U on its own, you know, it's a new Super Mario Bros. Game in HD, and while yes, I even admitted in my Nintendo Lite consoles video, I believe it was, from just a couple days ago, that yes, you know, it could be said, or no, actually, I think it was in my Super Mario 3D Land video, I believe. Regardless, I had even said that yes, out of the new Super Mario Bros. Games, it could, you know, I can definitely agree that yes, there is a claim to be made, or a stance to be made, that New Super Mario Bros. U was the least innovative of the New Super Mario Bros. Games. That being said, by the time that it was all said and done, once we got the DLC with New Super Luigi U, as well as the fact that this was literally just New Super Mario Bros. But in HD, and it was very clear that this was trying to kind of be like the you know, the culmination of all the New Super Mario Bros. Games, just kind of like taking all the best elements of all of them, taking some of the design philosophies from New Super Mario Bros. 2, taking some of the co-op elements from New Super Mario Bros. Wii, taking some of the experimental features like the iconic like Van Gogh painting looking level that everybody talks about in this game, which is very, you know, it's definitely more like something you would have seen from DS, just taking all these elements from all the other New Super Mario Bros. Games, adding in a few new things like some new power-ups and enemies and such, and just kind of like combining it all into one beautiful HD package. Because I don't care what anybody says, you look at New Super Mario Bros. U to this day, whether you're talking about the Wii U original or the Switch remaster, which, you know, I mean, it was more or less just a port, but it did kind of like bump up the resolution a bit, so even though it was technically a port, it could be argued that it was a light remaster of sorts. Whatever, regardless, you know, it's still a beautiful looking game, and, you know, that goes further into the discussion of like, hey, you know, you can go for realistic graphics in a game, and while I always, you know, I can't stand when people are like, oh, I'm so sick of realistic graphics, the graphics don't matter. It's one of those things where it's like, dog, that's not for you to say. It's for the artist creating the art to decide. If they want to go for a realistic style, even though they're still working with PS2 hardware, let them do what they want to do. If anything, I always think it's cool for developers to actually try and do that, so then we can kind of gauge of like, okay, where is the power at the moment? And during the PS4 generation, I was like, okay, you know what, we're not going to get any better than this, but then here we are with the Series X and PS5, and it's like, alright, even though on the surface, it may not seem like we've actually gotten a lot better than the PS4 and Xbox One generation, we actually have come a good, like, you know, when it comes to like resolutions and performance and just like the amount of sheer detail on screen, yeah, you know, the PS5 and Series X is actually a pretty big leap if you have any knowledge of game development or just how any of that stuff works, or like trying to resource manage what resources you actually have to work with on the console. Like, it is actually still very impressive, the type of things that we're seeing in games. But anyway, going back on track here, it is one of those situations where, you know, it could be argued that looking at even a game from the PS4 generation that tried to go for a more realistic take doesn't exactly stack up in terms of that sheer realism when compared to a newer, you know, more realistic game like something like Horizon Forbidden West. But, you know, when it comes to games like this that just go for more of their distinct art style, they're kind of timeless in a sense to where, I couldn't tell if this released today or, you know, like over 10 years ago, because this one released like 12 years ago at this point. You know, I couldn't tell the difference just because the art style is that crisp, it's that HD, it's that unique, and it's just, it looks so good. But New Super Mario Bros. U and that game and its reception and just everything about that game, I feel like really did kind of pave the way for what the rest of the Wii U generation was going to look like, because in some aspects, you had some of the safest games released, as well as some of the most mind-blowing 10 out of 10 masterpieces that are still holding up the Nintendo Switch to this day. And that's another reason that I love the Wii U. If it wasn't for the Wii U, I'm just gonna say it, the Switch wouldn't be where it's at right now, at least in terms of software. In terms of overall sales, it's hard to say because there has been a lot of phenomenal games released on the Switch. Don't get me wrong, look at Tears of the Kingdom. Breath of the Wild, by the way, does not count. That was always meant to be a Wii U game that just happened to take so long that it needed to release as a launch title for the Switch. Now, it can be said that maybe, you know, since they knew the Switch was coming up, they intentionally delayed it internally so then it could launch day and date with the Switch as well as the Wii U. But regardless, it was always advertised and known that it was going to be a Wii U game. So I always looked at Breath of the Wild, and still do, as a Wii U game. But still, when you look at the Switch, you got Tears of the Kingdom, which again is still an iteration of Breath of the Wild, so thank you Wii U for Tears of the Kingdom. And then you got other games like, you know, Mario Odyssey or Pikmin 4 or Luigi's Mansion 3, you know, all of these fantastic games on the Switch, not to mention mentioned, some of the other games that are not necessarily first party Nintendo, but are more like, I guess, like second party, or at least exclusive to the system in some way, like the Xenoblade Chronicles games or Bayonetta 3, which again, when you look at those games, you can thank the Wii or the Wii U for some of those. Like, look at Bayonetta 1 and 2. Even though Bayonetta 1 was on other platforms, you had like Bayonetta 2 on Wii U. And just in case I didn't say it already, but I believe I already said it, yeah, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, one of the best Donkey Kong Country and just one of the best 2D platformers of all time, period. And then you look at something like Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which, as I was talking about earlier, I was literally just going back and playing the original version on my Wii U this morning of Mario Kart 8, just because I feel like there is still a good bit of charm to be had there, going back and playing that original version just because of how it was set up before. Don't get me wrong, I love Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. The amount of content in the game is absolutely insane. Definitely hands down the most amount of content in terms of any Mario Kart game, but still, I'm one of those guys where it's like, even if a newer version of a game is available, I'll still go back and play that older one. Like, for example, say there's like, how there's like the remastered BioShock games? As great as that new collection is, a full 1080p or 4K 60 FPS, I still go back and play the original, like 30 FPS versions on Xbox 360 and PS3, just because there's nostalgia not only for the games themselves, but also just for playing it on the original system they were released for. But going even beyond that, you look at games like Super Smash Bros., which, it was kind of like a dual release there for 3DS and then Wii U as well. But obviously, when you look at like Smash Ultimate, it's very clear that it was basically just the Wii U game. But I mean, while it's not the exact same game, obviously, like, I mean, especially now with all the DLC that has been added, at its fundamental level, it was clearly built off the bones and the meat that was already there with the Wii U version. While Nintendo has definitely chilled out in the past, however many years now, because really, we haven't really seen as many Wii U ports as we did, say, in like 2018, 2019, for example, because that's like the main year where I was like, alright, basically the entire Wii U library is like becoming available on Switch back then. But yeah, they haven't done that as often in recent years. Now they're kind of diving back more into the Wii ports, it seems like, lately. Like, we had Return to Dreamland Deluxe just like a year or two ago, and then we had Donkey Kong Country Returns HD coming up here soon. But again, a whole other thing, which that in itself does kind of tie into the Wii U, because again, the Wii U, as I had said towards the beginning of this video, was basically just like, hey, it's the Wii, but we're in HD now, and we're trying to appeal to some more of the hardcore gamers. Because while, yes, they still did have plenty of hardcore games on the Wii, and they had the Classic Controller and the Classic Controller Pro to try to appeal to some of the more pro gamers, the fact that the default console, or the default controller, rather, out of the box was, the whole Wii mode and the nunchuck setup, where you gotta aim at the TV, was enough to turn off some more of the, quote-unquote hardcore gamers, which in itself, I always felt to be a pretty stupid moniker, because when you say hardcore gamer, I feel like it's actually kind of the opposite, because saying hardcore gamer kind of implies that, oh, Xbox 360 or PS4 controller is all that gaming can ever be. When I feel like if you're a true hardcore gamer that actually cares about the medium, you should be trying to experiment with different peripherals, different types of control, different kinds of games. Like, for me, I never want to label myself as like, oh, I'm hardcore gamer, but I will say, like, yeah, obviously I'm a gamer. I mean, I got bookshelves and consoles all around me, just full of games and stuff. And one of the things that I love most about gaming is just how experimental and how much freedom there is there, because as I, again, had mentioned earlier, like when we were talking about New Super Mario Bros. U, video games and just the whole medium of video games are an art form, and it is up to the artist to design not only how the video games work, but also the engineers and, the designers of the consoles and the hardware and such, as to how the games are going to be controlled, how they're going to play one way or the other. So while, yes, as much as I love playing games with, say, like an Xbox Series X controller or a DualSense controller, because those controllers are absolutely amazing, I still do love playing games with, like Wiimotes, or really getting crazy with it and like sticking my head into one of the Virtual Boy goggles, or, just going outside of the realm of what we ever thought to be possible. Or for another example, using the Wii U gamepad and like playing Splatoon with the gyro as well as the touch controls, because there is just, again, as much as I love standard controllers, there is just something that takes that gaming experience, I don't want to say to a whole new level or a higher level, but rather just like a different plane or a different experience in general, where you're playing games in ways that you would typically not think of playing games, or in ways that you haven't experienced before. Because I can tell you again right now, when I played Splatoon for the first time back in, what was that, like 2015 or so, you know, it was just unlike anything I had ever really seen up to that point, at least when it came to like console gaming specifically. We'd obviously seen things similar to that on like DS or even 2DS, where you had games utilizing touchscreen and gyros and stuff like that, and we even had like more gyro and pointer and motion controls on the Wii, obviously, but combining all of those elements to where it was like a DS almost, but on a console, to where you had the touchscreen, you had the gyro, and the way that the gyro works so seamlessly with Splatoon, because you could still kind of use the stick to turn and aim a little bit, but it was mostly based on your gyro and moving and stuff. And I've always been the kind of guy where I always prefer stick control if I can have it, but Splatoon was the one example where I was like, oh my gosh, this is gyro done right. Like, this actually works, and I'm glad that Nintendo's been leaning into some of those elements with the Nintendo Switch. You know, it's basically like every Switch or every Nintendo console, sorry, in one, where you have the touchscreen in handheld mode, which does kind of make a bit of a weird separation to where there's some games on the eShop or even just some physical games where you can only play them in handheld mode. Like, one of my prime examples I always point to is like Pokemon Cafe Remix, where it's basically just a mobile game and it's on Switch, but you can only play it in handheld only, which does kind of stink. I wish there were some stick controls, because that is a really fun game to just kind of like, okay, you know what, I've had a long day at work, and you know, there's like thousands of levels in that game, so it's not anything you're gonna beat probably ever, but you know, you can go in it and just be like, all right, I'm just gonna kill some time, just kind of let my brain turn off and relax for a bit, because it is a really satisfying and fun game to play. But unfortunately, there's no stick control, so you have to play it in handheld mode. But still, going back to what I was saying, like, the Switch is basically like the ultimate Nintendo console, because not only do you have every generation, or almost every generation, barring a few like Virtual Boy, for example, or you know, like, for the most part, you can play every generation of Nintendo on there, whether it be through Nintendo Switch Online or through ports or remasters or remakes that they've done. But then you also have the Joy-Con, where it has like some of the camera features like you would have seen on, say, like a DS, for example, where you have the camera there. Sure, it's not exactly a camera, but it's still like an IR camera. You know, you're playing 1-2 switch, nom nom nom, playing the one mini game, and then you have some of the more like gyro / motion-y controls that you can use for games like Nintendo Switch Sports or the House of the Dead remakes. And you know, obviously that leans real heavily into the Wii stuff. Does work as efficiently as something like, you know, the actual Wii mode and the IR, you know, sensor bar and all that. I would debatably say probably not, because I do find myself having to reset it. Just, you know, the fact that you have to reset it at all is enough to be like, okay, or rather recalibrate it. That's enough to be like, all right, this doesn't work necessarily as well or as fluently as the Wii, because the Wii was basically like 100% success rate, whereas the Switch Joy-Con, it's a 95% success rate, but for those times where you have to recalibrate it or kind of get things reconfigured, yeah, you know, it's one of those things where it can just throw you off for a second there. But there is still a lot of innovative Wii-like experiences, like ARMS, which is a very underrated Switch game, unfortunately. But again, considering the fact that game did rely on a lot of more multiplayer elements, it kind of makes sense why it hasn't, why it isn't talked about as much nowadays. But you know, for the folks that did play it or still do play it from time to time, I mean, you know, it is still a really fun and innovative experience, harkening back to those Wii days with the motion controls. But then beyond all that, you also have more of, I want to point to like the GameCube and the Wii U generation, where they were clearly trying to, I guess, appeal to more quote-unquote hardcore gamers. Where you have, you know, just like the standard control scheme, whether that be with the Pro Controller or with the Joy-Cons. Me personally, I still gotta buy a Pro Controller. I really do want to get one at some point, because I've heard it's such an amazing controller. I haven't actually gotten to hold one yet. Like, I saw one at GameStop the other day, because they have like a kiosk there or whatever, but I didn't actually hold it, just because I don't touch controllers when I'm out in public. You know, those kiosks, bunch of kids picking their nose and yeah, no thanks, I don't want to touch those kiosks. But yeah, so I do want to get a Pro Controller at some point. But you know, the Joy-Cons work more than well enough. Like, for example, I was just playing Call of War as Gunslinger, because basically, now this is a real funny situation, because that game released on the 360 and PS3, and currently the most, if you want to say the most definitive or HD way to play it, would actually be on the Switch. And that's also another weird case where the physical version only comes with a code, and there's not actually a cartridge in the box, so that's just... I never understood why games did, like, why even do the physical version at that point? Like, it's cool to have the cover art, I guess, but it just defeats the perp. Anyway, I ended up just buying it digitally, because it was on sale for like $2 or $3. I bought it a long time ago at this point, but I was finally just firing it back up, you know, because they have like a fun arcade mode that's fun to just blast through, even after you complete the story, which obviously I did back in the day. But they have an arcade mode, you can just kind of turn your brain off, shoot some stuff for a bit. And even, you know, playing an FPS like that, you know, it's real chill, but, you know, the Joy-Cons work perfectly enough for that, so definitely suitable for more of a hardcore hardcore game. But again, if you're truly like a quote-unquote hardcore gamer, or if you're truly in love and hardcore about this medium, I really do think you should be keeping your mind open to thinking beyond just standard controllers and thinking about innovative experiences like the Wii U. But anyway, so just to kind of reel it all back in, because I know sometimes I go on these tangents or these long conversations and it can kind of be hard to remember where we even started at. And this all started with me saying that the Wii U kind of walks so the Switch could run, or in other words, you know, like the Wii U kind of laid the foundation for the Switch for a lot of the best-selling titles and, you know, a lot of the most popular games on the Nintendo Switch, if you really sit down and think about it. Again, not to mention all the other ports like we had, like Captain Toad Treasure Tracker. And once I say that, there's probably going to be plenty of people that are like, well, Grotesque, you kind of just outed yourself there. You're talking about your love for the Wii U, yet you just said that basically all these games are on the Switch, so why even play the Wii U at that point? And again, it goes back to what I was saying before about how I just like playing the original hardware that these games were, you know, intended for, or originally designed for. Like, if I'm going to play Tropical Freeze, I'm going to play it on the Wii U. If I'm going to play Breath of the Wild, I'm going to play it on the Wii U. If I'm going to play Super Mario 3D World or New Super Mario Bros. U, playing it on the Wii U. Super Mario 3D World, that's another game I talked about a couple of days ago in one of my videos, where I said that I actually prefer the Wii U version of that game because the Switch version sped up the character movement, but for me, I feel like the Wii U version with this movement being a bit slower actually flows a bit better for that game, just because that's what it was originally like designed for, with that speed of movement. Just my personal opinion, just like my preferred way of playing, you know, just kind of taking things slow, just kind of like taking in the environments and playing as I play. But if you're a player that likes to go a bit quicker, if you like to get a bit chaotic with the family or with your siblings or a loved one, then, you know, it would make sense why you like the faster version. To each their own on that one. Neither one is wrong one way or the other. It's just an opinion type of thing. But there's still plenty of games that are exclusive to the Wii U or have versions that could be seen as being better in one way or the other for the Wii U, like Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, for example. Like playing through that original story with the original ending and original levels and stuff like that. Like, I always just felt like Captain Toad Treasure Tracker was, I don't know, I always preferred the way that the Wii U game's story and levels and everything went. And again, we're talking about, you know, Captain Toad Treasure Tracker, so when I say story, it's not like we're talking about like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or something like that, where, you know, the story's like a huge component of it, people are dying, there's like the world's coming to an end, the story is a huge deal. No, of course, most of it's just like the puzzle-oriented levels and such, but, you know, there's just something about the levels and the original endings and such that I did prefer about the Wii U version. And then you look at games, one of my favorite examples being Tokyo Mirage Sessions, where that was such a huge deal at the time, because that was at a point where I feel like RPGs were still relatively niche, but they were finally kind of making their way into the mainstream. You know, RPGs were niche for a while, but, you know, during like the PS1 generation, they started to finally pick up some traction. PS2, you know, same thing with like games like Final Fantasy X coming out, and then games like Fable, which weren't necessarily full-on turn-based RPGs and such, but they were still RPGs in a way. Then we get to the PS3, 360 generation, just getting bigger and bigger with the RPGs, and then finally by the time the Wii U released, which was between the 360 and the Xbox One generation, you know, kind of in that generation there between the 7th and the 8th, it was basically at that point to where it is nowadays, where RPGs are pretty mainstream. You know, you had a lot of big titles coming out like Final Fantasy 13, as well as a bunch of like MMOs releasing around that time and such. So, you know, RPGs by the time the 7th generation rolled around, I do want to say were way more mainstream than they were before. So a lot of more people knew about games like Fire Emblem and Shin Megami Tensei. I would say Shin Megami Tensei, even to this day, is relatively niche comparatively speaking to other games like Persona, which is funny because Persona is technically just like a spin-off series of Shin Megami Tensei in a way, or, you know, any of the other big hitters like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest example. But, you know, even still, for the fans of that series, and especially Fire Emblem, which, you know, has always been a very popular RPG series, having a crossover like that was just insane. I absolutely love Tokyo Mirage Sessions to this day, and the fact that it's stuck on the Wii U and there's no port in sight, and it's one of those things where I've said this before, where I don't believe that games ever truly need remakes, remasters, ports, whatever. The example I always point to is like the Mona Lisa. You wouldn't look at the Mona Lisa and say, oh, it's time for a remaster, it's time for a remake, it's time for a port because that painting is too old. Like, what are we even talking about? Dog, it's a painting. It's a piece of art. Just let it exist and be what it is on the platform it was released for. That being said, video games are a very different medium, to be fair, and it does get to a point of where, like, something like Tokyo Mirage Sessions, okay, to play that game, you need to get a Wii U, which there was only, like, 12 or 13 million of those things sold, so that thing's is only going to get more expensive on the secondhand market, and the game itself is still, you know, not outrageously expensive, but still getting up there. I don't think it's above MSRP yet. At least it wasn't when I bought it, but, you know, who knows? The market's fluctuating on a daily basis at this point. I cannot stand secondhand sellers. It should be illegal for things to be above MSRP, but that's just my take. Sure, that could lead to a ton of supply issues, but at the same time, I mean, hey, you know, rather that than these insane prices. Again, it should just be illegal. But anyway, regardless, just to kind of, you know, some of my thoughts on that. The days and the, you know, the time is numbered when it comes to the accessibility of actually being able to play the game, because even regardless past all that, what happens when disc rot starts happening for Wii U games? Now, you know, we're still many years off from that, because the Wii U is only 12 years old, but it's only going to be a matter of time. I mean, look at, you know, some people talking about their Dreamcast, their Sega Saturn, their PS1 games starting to have disc rot. Now, granted, those were CDs, and CDs, in a way, are a bit less durable or less resistant to, say, something like rot, rather than, like, Wii U discs, which were definitely a bit more durable. But still, you know, it'll happen at some point. You know, physical objects, molecules, and materials just degrade over time. So eventually, at some time in the future, that game is going to be just completely inaccessible. So this is the one situation where I would say that a remaster, remake, or port would be beneficial. Now, again, I said that I don't feel like these things are ever required or necessary, but I will say that they can be beneficial. So, you know, I hate the sentiment when people are like, oh, this game needs a remake so bad. It needs it so bad. Look at this game. It's so dated. It needs it so bad. Please re-release this game. But then those people will complain about games being re-released over and over. Again, people just don't make sense. So it's a game where it doesn't need the remake. You know, it's perfectly fine as it is, but if they would, you know, remaster it or port it up, it would definitely be very appreciated, because that's a game that I wish more people could experience, because it's a great game. And again, it was huge. It's a huge deal. Two huge RPG IPs crossing over like that. Like, I wish we could see something like that happen again nowadays, like something massive. Give us like a three-way with like Persona, Final Fantasy, and Dragon Quest. Those are like the three, well, okay, maybe, I don't know, between either Dragon Quest or Fire Emblem, whichever one's bigger. I feel like those are some of the three biggest RPG IPs where it's like, okay, you did a double before with SMT and Fire Emblem. Give us a three-way between all of them. Dude, that would be insane. I don't even know how they do it. Which Final Fantasy protagonist do you choose? Do you choose like Tidus? Do you choose Cloud? Do you maybe choose Prince Noctis from 15? I mean, like, I know, where do you go? Another thing that I loved about the Wii U, which really harkens back to what I was saying before about how the Wii U was basically just the Wii, but with more power and HD and all that, is how it supported all the peripherals from the Wii. Like the Wii wheel, guys, we can still use the Wii wheel. I'm so glad Nintendo decided to support it. I always thought it was hilarious how Nintendo would advertise on their games like, hey, this game supports the Wii wheel. Dog, the toast I ate this morning would support the Wii wheel if I just mushed it up enough and make it fit. But not only did a bunch of games like, say, Mario Kart 8 or New Super Mario Bros. U, for example, you know, were compatible with things like the Wii mode, to where, you know, you just connect it and it still had some of the motion controls. Or if you play like Call of Duty Black Ops 2 in the Wii U, for example, you can still plug in the Wii mode and the nunchuck like you would have done on the Wii, because obviously the Wii had a couple of Call of Duties. For some reason, it missed out on MW2, but thankfully it still got games like, you know, like COD 4 and MW3, Black Ops World War and all that. And then once we got to the Wii U, it only got Black Ops 2 and Ghosts, and neither of those games had DLC, which was unfortunate, because it would have been really cool. Because one of the things about playing Black Ops 2 in the Wii U is you can actually play it on this screen here with sound and everything. So like playing Origins on this thing, just like laying in bed, that would have been like a dream come true back in the day, like Mob of the Dead or whatever. But anyways, yeah, you know, there were so many features packed into the Wii U. Like everything that worked with the original Wii worked here, because obviously the Wii U was also it was fully backwards compatible with the Wii. But you know, this wasn't a feature that was actually accessible on the market, obviously, because there was no GameCube ports on the Wii U. But if you mod the system, it is compatible with GameCube games. Don't ask me how I know. Just kidding. You can ask me. My Wii U is modded, and it can run literally every system under the sun between the Wii U, the Wii, the GameCube, and then when it comes to emulation, anything from the N64 or PS1 and back, it can run literally all of them, and I have emulators for all of them, and it is beautiful. I have a 512 gigabyte SD card plus a 2 terabyte hard drive hooked up to my Wii U, though I am planning on upgrading to a 1 terabyte hard drive, or 1 terabyte SD card, just because that's where my Wii and my GameCube ROMs are, whereas on my hard drive, that's where my Wii U games are. So on the SD card, I want to get double the space, and then I can store all the games that I want. But yeah, you know, so that'll be an upgrade that'll be coming soon, because not only is it the Wii and the GameCube games on there, but it's also all of my emulators. So yeah, when you stack up all the emulators and all the different game libraries that I want to have on there, it makes sense how I ran out of space. The Wii U is just an absolute powerhouse. And another cool feature that a lot of people don't know, this camera right here, it's actually an IR sensor. So if you like like hold up a camera to it, you'll actually be able to see like the little IR things. But it, you know, if you hold it up, because you know the Wii U had that little stand for the gamepad, if you put that up and you aim the Wii mode at it, because there was a way when you were in Wii mode for the console to where you could still see the Wii game playing on here, you could just point your Wii mode at the gamepad and it would still work like a normal pointer. So you could just hold, you know, if you say your mom or dad are watching like, you know, football or whatever, they're kicking back, it's Sunday evening, well, you know, you and your, you know, your siblings or your friends or whoever could just go to your room, set this up, get the Wii modes pointed at it, and you could still play like Wii Sports just on the gamepad, which, you know, I always thought was just such a cool feature, and I did actually end up utilizing it multiple times. Totally random thought that I just thought about, but another example of a game where the Wii U is my preferred way to play it is Lego City Undercover. So this is definitely a situation where on the Switch, the PS4, and the Xbox One, you're definitely going to be getting better performance as far as just straight up like loading times go, because the Wii U version of the game is kind of infamous for having long load times. That being said, if you look up graphics comparisons between the Wii U and the Switch and the PS4 and PC versions and all that, there's just something about the art style, which is, again, something I talked about earlier before, where, you know, art style can really make all the difference. You know, again, if you're going for a realistic style, you know, that's totally fine, because in my opinion, the realistic style is technically an art style in itself, because you have to be skilled. It's not like they just, you know, transport the real life into these video games. Like, people are so, I don't know what the word is, but just so not derivative, I don't know what the word is, but you know what I mean, like, too critical about it or whatever. They're very ignorant to how that stuff actually works, because it isn't as simple as like, oh, we're just taking the real world and slapping it in a game. No, they actually have to create that art and those assets to make those games look realistic, because again, they just look realistic. They aren't actually like realistic in the way that, oh, it's literally just the real, it's not like, you know, shooting a movie, it's just the real world. No, it's like they have to create that stuff. So that in itself is an art style. But still, there's something about the original art style, or not even necessarily just the original art style, but rather the original color palette of the Lego City Undercover on Wii U version specifically, that I prefer. I don't know, it's like a bit of like a yellowy tint to it or something like that, but I don't know, I like the way it looks. It feels very soothing, very calming, whereas the newer version, it still looks great, you know, higher resolution. I think it might be a higher frame rate, or at least a more stable frame rate on the newer versions, but, you know, again, it's just one of those things where it looks a bit cleaner, and it kind of lacks a bit of that soothing feeling that I got from that yellowy tint on the Wii U version. But anyway, I don't know. I don't want to go on for too long. There's also a lot of underrated gems on the Wii U that I love. This was also that era where you could have the same game where it's like it's named the exact same thing, like Sonic Lost World, but you'd have two different versions. One version on the 2DS or the 3DS, and then another version on the Wii U. And, you know, that's just a random thought that came into my head, but there was a lot of dual releases like that, so that's just another fond memory from this generation, being able to get a game on the Wii U and 3DS and either have it be the same game and just having that be cool in its own right, like Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, which was, like, super innovative at the time, having a game have, like, cross-save and everything like that, and, like, you know, whatever, just being the same thing on Wii U and 3DS, that was amazing. But then also having other examples, like, again, Sonic Lost World, where it was technically two different games with the same name, but Sonic Lost World is a game on the Wii U that I was just thinking of, where I always absolutely loved it. There were some elements from like Mario Galaxy in there between like the planets and like running around in like the 3D spheres or whatever, but always loved that game. The soundtrack to it is just absolutely is amazing as well. The story and characters are so charming. The levels are great. There's so many great Sonic games on the Wii U as well. But anyways, yeah, I'll stop my jib job. I know I've been talking for a while at this point, but this was my chill, laid back, reminiscing, nostalgic, talky, rambly session about the Wii U. So I'd love to hear from you guys. You know, am I crazy? Just kidding. Don't answer that. I know I'm absolutely bad insane. But no, seriously, I love the Wii U, and whether you do or whether you don't, I feel like it's important to at least pay the respect it deserves. You know, I feel like every console is, you know, every piece of art, every console, every piece of hardware, anything that was designed by a human being deserves to be respected, loved, and cherished in some way, because even if the product itself didn't do incredibly well or didn't do what it was setting out to do, like the Wii U, for example, where it only sold 13 million units, it was simply a stepping stone or a building block to something even better, or just, you know, a brighter horizon or a brighter future. And, you know, because, again, as much as I love that the Wii U, it was obviously a bit of a dark time for Nintendo, just because they were doing everything they could just to make this console work feasibly for them without having to, you know, shut down their console division. You know, that legendary story of Satoru Iwata taking, like, 50% off of salary just so they didn't have to lay anybody off, and just to kind of, you know, deal with, you know, the lack of funds that they had at the time during the Wii U thing, which you know, RIP Satoru Iwata. I have an insane amount of respect for that guy that cannot be described or expressed in words. Like, genuinely, I just, the amount of respect I have for that man, again, just cannot be expressed. But again, all of those failures that they endured at the time just went on to lead to the Switch, which is now on its way to becoming the best-selling console of all time. Will it become the best-selling console? It's hard to say, but I do think over time, just like, yeah, as the generation slows down, as price cuts happen, as systems kind of trickle out there between that cross generation period between the Switch to the Switch successor, and, you know, you just kind of, I think it'll either get close, come even, or go out slightly ahead. I don't think it's going to shoot massively ahead of the PS2 or the DS or anything like that, but I do think it's going to be like right there. Especially with how technology and collectors are nowadays, and with like the limited editions that they have to release yet, I do think it's going to get there at some point. Not sure when, but I do think it'll get there. But again, no matter how you actually feel about the console, at the very least, it does deserve to be respected, because again, it was made by humans, it was made by artists, it was made by people, sentient beings, and that in itself is enough to deserve at least some love, respect, recognition, and just, you know, acknowledgement. Now, I do specify that because obviously we're getting to that age where it's kind of unclear what's actually being made by humans and not humans nowadays. Conversation for another day. It's a scary future ahead for sure, but, you know, at the very least, the Wii U is a nice callback to the era where everything, you know, Nintendo's been very vocal in recent times about their, you know, like, not wanting to do anything with AI, so mad respect to them for that. But, you know, again, even if something like that would happen and Nintendo would change their tune and start messing with AI in the future, at the very least, the Wii U is always going to be a nice reminder of a time where everything was made by humans, made with love, made with care, made with risks. Because even though the Wii U didn't necessarily work out as far as financials are concerned, I mean, you know, it's one of those things where that quote-unquote failure is still just a reminder that it was made by humans, which just makes it all the more beautiful. And furthermore, even if it wasn't financially viable for Nintendo, it was emotionally and nostalgically viable for me and many others, to where I'm sure the console didn't work out for them financially, but now I have a lifetime of amazing memories to reminisce upon and constantly relive with this system and the games I released for it, and for that, I am eternally grateful for the Wii U, the games I released for the Wii U, and all of the people that created it. So, if anybody from Nintendo happens to be watching this for some reason that had a hand in creating the Wii U, then all I can say is thank you. But anyway, as always, massive shout out, thank you to all the patrons and channel members. Thank you to all the low ball tier, and shout out, thank you to all the mid ball tier. My last name is Daddy Man, the bitch that was on D tier. Run, Venge, someone, she's cool. Thank you guys so much. You guys are literal legends. I love you. Thank you guys for watching. Have an amazing day. Stay beautiful. I love you all. Peace.